Welcome to this highly dense explainer. Think of this as your strategic briefing on one of the most absolutely critical geopolitical events of the year, that May 2026 meeting between Donald Trump and Xi Jinping in Beijing. We're going to dive straight in and unpack the core theme of this summit, which is managed geopolitical rivalry. And we're going to map out exactly how this meeting sends shockwaves through the global economy, international security, and critically, what it means for India's domestic and foreign policy. Let's get into it.
Okay, let's dive into this. Here's our roadmap for today. 1. Summit context and dynamics. 2. Economic and security flashpoints. 3. The fragmented multipolar order. 4. Strategic implications for India. And 5. Our exam framework and revision. This structure is basically your visual memory system to lock in these concepts for maximum conceptual clarity and rapid revision later.
All right, jumping right into Section 1, Summit Context and Dynamics. This is our trigger event.
Let's look at the timeline to understand the macro geopolitical trigger here. Now, the pre-May 2026 environment, it was basically a pressure cooker. We had an escalating conflict involving Iran, tensions over Taiwan were absolutely peaking, and there was massive global economic uncertainty. This all culminated in that May 14th to 15th meeting in Beijing. And what happened post-summit? Well, the reality shifted heavily towards stabilization rather than resolution. Neither side actually solved their core issues. They simply slammed on the brakes to avoid a total systemic collapse. So that brings us to our foundational concept, managed rivalry. What does that mean exactly? It's a strategic posture where major powers seek limited stabilization and crisis management to prevent uncontrolled confrontation, despite maintaining long-term structural competition. Listen, both the United States and China fundamentally recognize that unchecked, sustained instability would just severely disrupt the global economy. So they're managing the friction, right? Not ending it.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the inherent paradox it shows. On one hand, you have diplomatic engagement, things like crisis management, trade stability dialogues, trying to avoid global economic destruction. But on the exact same token, the structural rivalry is still very much alive. Disagreements over the Taiwan dispute, Indo-Pacific influence, tech dominance, military balance, these remain totally irreconcilable. It's essentially crisis management, absolutely not strategic reconciliation.
Moving on to Section 2, Economic and Security Flashpoints. This is really the core dynamic of the whole situation.
And this brilliantly illustrates exactly how geopolitics, the economy, and security all crash into each other across 3 key flashpoints. First up, technology. With semiconductor controls and the AI race, economic security has basically merged entirely with national security. Second, we have West Asia. You've got overlapping anxieties here regarding China's heavy dependence on Gulf energy, along with shared concerns over the Iran conflict and the stability of the Strait of Hormuz. And third, Taiwan. This represents the most destabilizing military competition in the Indo-Pacific, and it carries massive risks for global supply chains.
Drilling down into the specifics, the core economic implications really center on semiconductor export controls, access to rare earth minerals, and this fierce competition over artificial intelligence. You see, technology restrictions are no longer just simple trade issues. They are literally the central instruments of strategic competition right now. The big takeaway here? Economic security is national security.
Okay, let's pivot to Section 3, the fragmented multipolar order and global alignments.
So the direct result of that bilateral summit is this idea of competitive coexistence. This defines an international system characterized by selective cooperation and sustained geopolitical rivalry, but crucially, without direct military confrontation between the major powers. Because there's this deep underlying strategic mistrust, this competitive coexistence is fully expected to be the defining feature of international politics for the next decade.
And because this global order is so fragmented, nations are actively rejecting those old Cold War-style exclusive blocs. Just look at this dynamic. Countries across Asia, Europe, and the Global South are likely to continue pursuing strategic balancing and multi-alignment rather than exclusive alignment with either bloc. Basically, countries are playing both sides, acting in their own strategic interests.
That leads us perfectly into Section 4, Strategic Implications for India. Let's look at that balancing strategy.
How does India navigate this era of managed rivalry? Well, the official response framework requires a few specific things. First, strengthening Indo-Pacific partnerships. And yes, that notably includes the US. But at the same time, maintaining necessary engagement with China. On the domestic front, the impact is huge. It mandates rapidly accelerating defense modernization, aggressively pushing for technological self-reliance, and really building up that critical supply chain resilience. So, the crucial point is this. India's definitive geopolitical shield in this highly fragmented world is strategic autonomy. By leaning heavily into balanced diplomacy and multi-alignment, India ensures it doesn't just get dragged into someone else's structural rivalry. Instead, it navigates that rivalry to secure its own economic and national security objectives.
All right, final phase of our explainer. Section 5, Exam Framework and Revision. This is our memory output engine. Let's move to and see how this builds a really solid step-by-step answer-writing framework for administrative exams. Step 1, you've got to define the trigger using managed rivalry. Step 2, map out those core flashpoints we discussed: technology, Taiwan, and West Asia energy. Step 3, analyze the fragmented multipolar order and the shift toward multi-alignment. And finally, Step 4, clearly articulate India's precise response through strategic autonomy.
For rapid revision, this matrix is absolute gold. It maps the macro geopolitical events, the Trump-Xi 2026 summit and managed rivalry, directly to the economy via tech and supply chains. Then we link that to security through Taiwan, the Strait of Hormuz, and AI. And finally, we draw a direct line right to India's response, which is strategic autonomy and defense modernization. It's a high-density matrix that connects all the dots.
Let's do a quick active recall check. Ask yourself right now, what are the 3 core areas of India's internal capability building that were triggered by this US-China competitive coexistence? Take a second. Okay, the answers are defense modernization, technological self-reliance, and supply chain resilience. Integrating those 3 elements is absolutely critical when you're mapping out the domestic impact.
To wrap things up, in a world where economic security has completely merged with national security, strategic balancing and multi-alignment will absolutely define the coming decade. Make no mistake, the era of managed rivalry is already here. So the ultimate question every nation, and frankly every analyst has to ponder right now is, are your supply chains secure?